Alright, we're back. Okay, we're going to work on our seal here, our case seal. So that's the part number for that. These are the old double wall seals, which ones I like using. So that means it's got a shield out here and it's got another one in here. So when you put it in, it holds really, really tight. So that's how that works. You got the seal lip right here, and you got the water lip out here and dirt lip. The oil lip is thicker than the other one. The other one's thinner. If you put the seal in like this, it's almost impossible to get out because this inner piece here will pop out. The steel stay put. It also will leak. This one here, you put this screw in here to get it out, you pull it out, the seal will actually come out. When it's in backwards like this, you have to grind the seal out, and it's a pain in the butt. And you'll be lucky if you don't damage the case doing it. I had to do one on the bike once. It was fun. Okay. Now we got two options here. We can either run a cork or not run a cork. Alright, so we don't have the original one. Okay, this is the late 77 to 79 seal spacer. So there's the part number right there for it. This one does not use the lock tab in there. So this has no locking tab. It's solid all the way around, nice and flat on top. The locking tab is right here. It's a little L tab. What it does is, when you have your spacer on top of here, this little L clip here drops into the spline like right there. There's a little notch right there. It engages, dogs into it, and this seal spacer will not rotate. So that way the seal will work, because if this is spinning in the seal, it's spinning on the shaft, it's not going to seal. The seal has to work. That's why they did it. So that's all the way from 36 up until 77, that's how they did it. Now, what I do is, I use the later one, which is for the Torrington bearing and not the loose roller bearing stuff. What they did is they eliminated the cork seal right here. It goes in the case. So this does not fit inside of here. See how it just barely fits in there? When you put this in a case, it squeezes together further, and this does not fit in there. It becomes tight. This diameter is too big. This seal's job is to seal the case up over here. So when you put this in here, so you got to squeeze it in there. Okay, that's squeezed in there. That goes underneath this seal here, and when you push it in, it squashes this cork against the outside of this here, up at this inner edge, and that seals the outside of this seal. Because a lot of times these cases are damaged when people go in there and pulling these seals out, because they always leak, they're always changing them. They screw up the case. This here seals the outside of the lip, so it doesn't matter how bad the case is, the oil doesn't get to the outside edge because it stops right where the cork pushes against it. It squeezes hard against this when you squeeze all the way on the bottom. So that's what they did on the early bike. On the later bike, they quit doing that. If you screw up the case, go buy another case. Same seal, goes in, no cork. So this is bigger diameter. Now if you want to run the cork in there, and run everything like an old bike did, you turn this down. Now the reason I want to run the one without the lip on here is because when you put your sealed nut on it, to try to seal this is a V-twin nut here. This is your sprocket nut, goes on here, hold your sprocket on. When you tighten all this stuff together, this here, push it against this, like that. Then you have the nut on the outside here, with the seal in it to stop the oil leak. The problem is you have this nice sealed up chamber now, right? No, you have a groove cut in there for the dog, for the key. So it leaks right out the hole. So it defeats the purpose of putting this in there. There's no reason to put this fancy nut on there if you are on the early one that has a notch in it. It just leaks out the hole. So I upgrade to this one here. And then if I want to use the cork, which I usually do, I have to turn this OD down a little bit so it'll fit inside the cork when it's inside the case and squeezed in. So you got to cut about 50 thou off this. Somewhere on my computer I wrote down how much I go down. Usually I got a stock one here, I just measure and cut it to stock size. But in this case I don't have it. And I don't have anything written down either. So we'll just have to wing it. So I know for sure I got to get down smaller than what I got. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this in the case right here. Get it leveled out so it's nice and flat. That's going to give me a diameter. Now I know when I push this against that, it's going to compress inward. So it's going to get smaller yet. So this is just the initial number we're going to use. So we're 2088 right now. And this is 312. So that's 22 thousandths, 24 thousandths bigger than what the seal is. Now we know that thing's going to squeeze in when you push on it. It's going to probably squeeze in at least 30 thou. So 2088, take 30 off that, we go down to 68. So we go from 312 down to 68. About right there. Got to cut down at least that much. Me, I think I'll cut it down further. I'm going to go at least 50. So that's a 1/16 of an inch off. So somewhere between 250 and 260 is when I want this to be at. Now this is the roller washer on the inside, so we know the rollers hit against this. The rollers also hit against this, so you got to make sure you don't go smaller than that. But there's no way we're going to go smaller than that because this is a lot smaller than 250. It's 2 inch almost. So we don't have to worry about cutting this too small. Now there's also a lip in the case in here where the bearing radius went in. You can measure that. See what that is. 2452. So obviously we're not going that size. It's way looser. So that's a bad thing to measure. Alright, so I'm going to cut this down about I'm going to cut down 60 thousandths probably. So we're going to go down to 250. So I need to be 250, 255, something like that. Alright, so we're going to go do that. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to polish this surface here so it's nice and smooth. Right now it's kind of rough. Not too rough. The oil on this kind of masking the noise of making grit. Clean off the goo off of it. The rust inhibitor. I like making these things nice and smooth. Like that. The other thing I like making smooth is this outer surface here. This one appears to be pretty nice. This one's pretty good quality. It's pretty smooth on both surfaces, but I like smoothing them up just a little bit. That way we know they got good seal on everything. Now the only thing that really seals this tranny oil in here is this lip right here. When this pushes against this edge right here, that's what the seal is. that little 20 thou lip right here, the difference in height between these two ODs, between this one here and this one here, is our sealing surface. That's what seals all the oil in the tranny. In order to do that, this has to be tight. If that's tight, it shouldn't leak. If it gets loose, like most of them are, there's a gap in there and the oil just runs right down the spline. So that's why it's a bad design. Now on the 5-speed bike, they put an O-ring right in here. That's inside of the, seals up in the inside of this, and that stops the leakage when the nut gets loose. They also use a bigger nut, same thread, but thicker, so you got more holding power. They don't loosen up as much. So that's how they improved it. Now a lot of guys will take this spacer and cut a groove in it and put an O-ring in there. The problem is the spline is cut right next to the edge of this. So if you cut this area out to put an O-ring in here, this area right in here, there's no room for strength. When you tighten this nut down, you're pushing against that edge, you just took all the support off of it. So now it's like a piece of channel sticking up, and when you tighten the nut, you just compress it like that, or it's going to work loose. The nut's going to get loose, it's going to leak. It's a bad design. So all those guys are selling these spacer modified, it's a bunch of crap. They weaken them up. Basically it's loose, it's going to leak. I don't care who makes it. Now what Andrews does is they take the gear and they move this out further, and they actually put a groove right there and put an O-ring in there, like a new bike, like a 5-speed. So Andrews does that on their tranny. So that's the only good one you got. So usually when I buy new parts, I like buying the Andrews gear because it has that O-ring in it. Nobody else does that. So other than that, there's no real fix for this except make sure it's good. Make sure this surface is nice and smooth because it has to seal against this surface right here. If there's any kind of lips in this or rough machining, it can leak past those grooves. So always make sure the surface are good. This, you can't do much about this, it is what it is. But these here, when they got really rough surface on it, I sand them flat, smooth. This one's in pretty good condition. This one's made pretty nice. So anyway, there you go, the ins and out of Harley leakage. Now the other thing that's out there is the nut. This is the V-twin nut, that part number there. This one does not have the O-ring in here. The O-ring on the seal there sounds like a good plan, but the problem is when you start tightening the nut and the O-ring up, the nut, it takes the O-ring and just shears it and wads it up and stuffs it underneath the nut. So now you got a piece of rubber between your nut and your sprocket, which means what? Oh yeah, it's loose. There's also a gap when it does that, so it leaks out. So I do not use the one with the O-ring, and I hate those things. The other thing is to do is I eliminate the lock, because the lock tab right here, which goes on here, goes against here, is a piece of soft metal that can squish and get loose. As this sprocket's going back and forth on the spline, it's working the metal and eventually gets loose. So if you have a soft piece in there, it's going to come loose. This is heat treated. This is heat treated somewhat because it's a good nut. So hard part against hard part with a little dab of sealer is what I do. And then this goes hard against the spacer on this side here. So we got a nice good sealed surface. That's how I do it. I eliminate the lock tab. I put Loctite on it. The nut cannot fall off the bike. Once the nut's loose, it doesn't matter if it's got 5 thou clearance or an 1/8 inch. It's loose. This is still going to leak. So, and most of the bikes I pull apart, take your finger on the nut and nut's loose. So they're leaking anyway. All right, so these are all things I do to make your 4-speed not leak. There you go. That's why 4-speeds leak. Okay, let's go get some work done. We'll be back.